Hi everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for our first Art Market Eye live talk in partnership with Ger Johns. First, a reminder that the session will be recorded and we'll be taking questions at the end of the session, and you can submit these via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I'm Anna Brody, I'm the art market editor of the Art newspaper, and I'm joined today by two brilliant colleagues. First of all, Georgina Adam, who is editor-at-large of the Art newspaper, a Financial Times contributor and author. Georgina has written about the art market for the past 30 years, or more than 30 years, and she is currently working on her third book on private museums, which will be due out at the end of the year. And Annie Shaw is contributing editor of the Art newspaper and has reported on the market since 2010. Annie also writes for the Financial Times, and she too is on deadline for a book titled Resist, which will be published next year. So today, inspired by the recent GameStop trading frenzy, but also the mad rush to cash in on non-fungible tokens or NFTs, we're going to be discussing whether you can game the art market, or at least maybe massage it a little bit. Fittingly for our gaming theme, Christie's is currently auctioning its first standalone NFT artwork by Beeple. It only went live yesterday at $100, and already it's up to $2.4 million. If that's not a bubble, I'm not sure what is. But more on NFTs later. To start, we're going to talk about GameStop briefly. To give a quick explanation of what happened, it's a sort of David versus Goliath tale of a group of small investors taking on the big hedge funds. GameStop is a Texas-based company which runs video game shops and is struggling, so some big hedge funds shorted their stocks, betting that its price would fall. But they lost millions in late January and early February when a group of amateur traders on the social news platform Reddit got together and bought a load of shares to push the price up. So the short-selling hedge funds had to buy back their shares at a higher price, which left a load of ruined investors and some instant millionaires. And GameStop's prices again are spiking in the past few days. Recently, the lawyer Alexander Herman asked a group of us on Twitter whether a group of well-organized amateurs could wreak similar havoc on the art market. And Georgina, you tweeted back, no. Can you tell us why?
Oh, hello, everybody. Yes, thank you for having me along here. And yes, indeed, I did say no, because I didn't think that the art market could. And I gave 6 reasons why I don't think this could happen in the art market. The most important one is a question of supply. If you look at the GameStop market, there were 47 million GameStop shares being traded, and they were being traded millions of times. Now, I had a look at the figures for the art market. In the year 2019, which is the last year we've got full figures, 40 million artworks were traded in a whole year, whereas here you've got millions and millions being traded every day. So there just isn't the supply in the art market to feed some sort of a frenzy like this. Secondly, there's a question of fungibility. Fungibility is when something is exactly the same as something else, like one share in GameStop. That's not the case with the art market. You know, works of art are not interchangeable in the same way. My third point is that affordability isn't the same. I mean, you could buy, before the frenzy, you could buy GameStop shares for $17 each. So you could actually take up a position in them for $100 or so. That's just not possible in the art market. We will talk, of course, about when we come onto the NFTs, we're getting nearer an affordability level. But at the moment, it's not possible to buy artworks that you could trade and game at that sort of level of investment. And of course, there's no exchange. I mean, there again, GameStop shares were traded on this exchange. They were traded massively and instantly. If you want to resell something in the art market, you have to go to a dealer, you have to go to an auction house. It's not a speedy transaction. There's no exchange for them at the moment. There again, when we come back to NFTs, we'll look at that aspect as well. And there's 2 other things. One of the things is access. You have to be able to buy the art if you want to resell it. And dealers are extremely wary of selling to somebody who they think are going to flip it. So you can particularly try walking into Gagosian and asking to buy a Koons if you're just Joe Bloggs. It doesn't work. So access is a big problem. There isn't access to art, even if there were that sort of volume. And finally, you can't short art, at least not yet. Maybe there are ways of playing with the market. But as far as I'm concerned, those 6 reasons are why you couldn't game the art market in the same way that GameStop shares were gamed.
Okay, so you really sort of have to be very, very wealthy, and you have to be within the art market to stand any hope of kind of playing it a little bit. So Annie, if a GameStop style scenario couldn't happen for the reasons that Georgina has covered, in what ways do people sort of, let's say, manage the market for their own ends?
I think manage the market is probably a good way of putting it, Anna. And there are numerous ways in which people manage or game the market. And these can range from propping up prices to artificially inflating value with a view to selling works a bit further down the line at higher prices. In some more nefarious cases, speculators, it's one Georgina taught me earlier, might coordinate bidding to reduce competition and price. Looking specifically at auctions, it's quite well known that when an artist's work is coming up at auction, a dealer will email collectors and ask them, gently urge them to support their artists, i.e. bid. Another scenario might be that as the market has become more leveraged, collectors will often bid on works by artists in their collection if they've used those works as collateral for a loan. So obviously they need to keep those prices up. And then we've got good old guarantees, which have been around for some time, but they can create an unlevel playing field in that a guarantor might be privy to information that Joe Bloggs bidding on a lot might not, and that usually means reserve prices. And collectors and dealers with a vested interest in an artist may also try and maintain high market values by putting in a guaranteed bid, although that can be quite costly if you end up being the winning bidder. Mm-hmm. I would point out that on the whole, these practices aren't illegal, but they certainly raise questions.
And they sort of tread a line, which in some cases sort of verges in the financial markets would verge on the edge of sort of insider trading, I suppose.
Right.
So I mean, one person who really did try to sort of game the market for their own ends was Inigo Philbrick. He at the moment is awaiting trial in the US for alleged fraud. He hasn't been charged with anything. We should add that. Inigo was caught by the FBI hiding out on a South Pacific island, hence our image here. So in 2018, I went to go and chat to Inigo, and he told me that he offered 20 to 25 third-party guarantees a year on artists like Rudolf Stingel, Christopher Wool, Wade Guyton, and Richard Prince. And he said the best outcome for him was come out with a lot of money and no painting, because these guarantees can be quite lucrative for people, because you get a financing fee in return for sort of risking your money on these works. So Georgina, what happens when you, like Philbrick did, sort of try and play on a market, but then that market, say with Philbrick and Stingel's market, when it starts to sort of nosedive a little bit, as Stingel's market did in around 2018?
Yes, yeah, it seems, I mean, he does really, really know that market. But the trouble was that the market sort of turned against him, and it was giving guarantees and working in a market like that, a very specific way. He did have good knowledge. It works until it doesn't work anymore. As long as things are going up, it's fine. But then the market started to turn, and that's really where his troubles began, because he started, allegedly, he started selling not 100% of the work, but 150%, i.e. he sold work to more than one person. And of course, that it spiraled and got worse and worse. And very often, like a gambler, you sort of think, well, I'll do one more thing and then I'll gain. And it didn't happen. And in fact, the Stingel market just collapsed is perhaps not the best word, but it certainly weakened a lot. And one of the ways we know this is that quite recently there was a lawsuit. It was brought by Joe Namath. The Namaths are traders in art, collectors, traders and dealers in art. And he had consigned a Stingel for sale to Philips. And Philips wrote back finally and said, sorry, we can't take it. It's because his market has weakened so much, we don't think we can sell it. Joe Name had said, well, no, you had a contract, it had a guarantee, which Annie mentioned. But the case was thrown out, and Philips was found to be in the right that they were allowed not to take the work. So that shows to what extent the market for Stingel had softened as part of this. Somebody who was trying, I think there's a number of reasons why the market softened, but certainly what Inigo was doing didn't help.
Yeah, it became sort of slightly tainted by association,
exactly.
I suppose. Yeah,
exactly.
And talking of sort of markets become a little tainted as well, and ones where the bottom has truly dropped out of it, perhaps we should look at the sort of cautionary tale of the zombie formalists back in sort of 2014, 2015. Georgina, I know that you've covered this a lot. Can you tell us a bit about sort of what happened there and why that bubble burst?
Yes, this was very interesting. This actually, it sort of started a little bit before that, started about 2012, and it was really at its strength between 2012, 2014, when there was this sudden interest in these works of art, which, as you can see from these two illustrations here, we've got Lucian Smith. Those were they were called rain paintings, and he found a way of putting paint into a fire extinguisher, and then he would sort of spray his canvases, and he could apparently do about 300 quite quickly. And then on the right, we have Jacob Cassay, who was actually at the beginning of this, and he found a way of, I think, using some sort of photographic technique. And for this short period, the 2 years, it's not that short, these works of art, which were neutral, reasonably interchangeable, they were absolutely bid to the skies. And they went from sort of being worth 20,000 or even less, 12,000 in the case of Cassay, and they went up at auction to about $300,000. Extraordinary. It seems that this was a bit, that there were people who were buying a whole group of works by the same artist, and then perhaps one put it into auction, it was bid up very much higher, and then in a sense everybody else who also joined the club, if you like, cashed in. I actually asked somebody who has a club in Los Angeles, Stefan Simkovic, about this, and asked if he did that, and he said no, he didn't do it. However, he said there were people who were doing it, so he didn't identify them. But of course, the whole thing collapsed, because once the investors or the speculators had taken their cut, there was just nobody left to pay these crazy prices for what were really rather uninteresting works of art. And just to give you an idea, there was a Cassay on the right. There was a Jacob Cassay that sold in, I think, 2016, and it sold for a really ignominious £1,250,000. And even a rain painting that went for, I think, £30,000, $20,000. And these works had been worth 300,000 before. So it really was a market that crashed in those cases. Of course, the funny thing is they really just went back to the original prices they were at, and the whole thing was just a bubble.
I find it rather sad, to be honest. Those artists' sort of careers were, I mean, it's not spectacularly interesting work, but it's a little bit sad what happened to them, and entirely sort of caused really by a load of speculators coming into a market fast and then departing it as well.
Yes, I think that is true. The artist is working away in his studio, and outside the studio, people are trading his works of art, and he may not have a word to say. But I did meet, somebody told me, I think it was Simon de Pury told me, he said, well, he did meet artists who were really trying to get in on that act. So I think there was a mixture of motives.
Yeah, kind of some young ambitious artists who were sort of working within that vein, because they could see the sort of money that it was bringing in for a short time only. There's another artist who, of course, is quite aware of their own market, and also the bottom dropped out of their market fairly fast as well. And if we look at what happened to Damien Hirst after his 2008 Sotheby's sale called Beautiful Inside My Head Forever, which happened famously on the night that Lehman Brothers crashed. So there, what was apparently a successful sale, his prices sort of plunged afterwards. So Annie, can you tell us a little bit behind what happened there with this sort of strangely successful sale, which then sort of went pretty sort of damp afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, Hearst's market has been carefully managed by a number of players, I think, over the years, including, and perhaps most importantly, by the artist himself.
Yes.
And he continues to do so selling over Instagram. And as we'll come to in a bit, you know, he's just announced an unlimited run of prints at £3,000 each via Henny. But as we know, in 2008, Hirst famously bypassed his dealers, Jay Joplin and Larry Gagosian, to sell more than 220 new works. And so these works had been made in his studio in the 2 years preceding the auction, so directly to Sotheby's. You know, we know that the sale was a success. He sold more than £111 million worth of art over 2 days as Lehman Brothers collapsed. But it was a huge risk, right? I mean, I think Larry Gagosian told Frank Dunphy, Hearst business manager at the time, that it sounded like bad business to him. Though, of course, Gagosian would say that because he was missing out on a huge cut on those sales. But in order to prevent it being bad business and to maintain prices, what transpired was that around 50% of works in that sale had actually been bought by Hearst dealers, and that was reported in the Sunday Times at the time. So it's a fascinating sort of situation here, the power dynamic between Hearst.
Who were those dealers, Annie? I think it was like 3 of them in particular, right?
It was I think White Cube reportedly bought 20 works, and it was Larry Gagosian, and it was I think it was Joe, one of them Agrabis, I think. So it was 3 of them involved. So they really propped up that auction. So it was ostensibly a huge success. But you know, these market players were sort of propping it up behind the scenes. And it's just this sort of matter of the power dynamic between Hearst and his dealers, which I found fascinating. And of course, he's due to take over Gagosian's Britannia Street Gallery when we reopen here in the UK, sort of mid-April, I think, for the whole of 2020.
And we're showing a slide of the 2 of them here because they've
looking very chummy.
Very, very chummy.
Yeah, in the good years.
Busy mates.
Yeah, exactly, busy mates. But I mean, to speak a bit about the Britannia Street show, I actually went on a recce earlier this week, and
yes, you did. You went and lurked around outside the gallery chatting to security guards.
Yeah, sleuth in chief we have.
This
here.
is it. The new town strikes. So yes, I went and lurked outside the gallery and actually managed to have a sneak peek of the show. Have we got a slide of that?
I think we got a slide of that as well that we can flash up. We can have a look at slide 9. Should be able to come up soon. Here it is.
So this is what you could see through the gap in the door, and it looks like there's a gorilla painting. I mean, and there's a butterfly painting to the left, and I think these are from his sort of 2009 Fact series, I think, but I've never seen them. There are these cabinets with jewelry in them. Again, I've not seen them before. I don't know if either of you are familiar with those works. They've got a cow's head on the floor there, which is more customary, but also these rubbish sacks, which I did ask the security guard if they were part of the installation, and he says yes. So
okay,
curious. I mean, largely unknown works. This show is, you know, the whole year the show is going to be showing works from 2005 to 2019, so we shall see.
Well, it comes along with an absolute tsunami of Hearst shows, though, doesn't it, Annie?
It does.
Right.
Yeah, and has he got 4 now? I mean, he's got all the works up in St. Moritz at the moment, and then the Galleria Borghese show.
Borghese. There's one somewhere in France. Where is
Cartier.
Cartier, yes.
Cartier with all the blossom paintings.
Cherry blossoms.
Yes. It's I mean,
and his own Newport Gallery as well.
And there's all of his things in Newport Gallery, which he's been putting extensively on Instagram. And I mean, in theory, it's not for sale, but you do wonder.
When I was at the opening, there were definitely collectors being shown around Newport Street with a view to buy. I mean, whatever the party line is, I'm sure there were deals being done.
Yes, I mean, everything has a price in a way. But I mean, I think it's actually interesting that the Gagosian deal is because it sort of solves everyone's problems in a way, doesn't it? Because Gagosian has that huge gallery at a time when people can't travel so much. So how is he going to, you know, he can hand it over to Hearst. Hearst is able to produce large quantities. And maybe it's a way of charming Hearst away from one of his other dealers.
Well, this is it. There's been that sort of rumour's been mooted, hasn't it, that Gagosian is trying to win Hearst from White Cube once and for all. And there's quite an interesting history with the power, the tussle between the galleries. And I mean, Hearst left Gagosian, I think, just days after Art Basel closed in Art Basel Miami Beach in 2012, following that sort of epic 11 venue tour or 11 venue show of all of Hearst's spot paintings.
Yes.
So
which apparently didn't do so well.
Yeah, so you've got to wonder whether there's a correlation. Hearst leaves shortly after. I don't know.
Yeah, curious. Didn't our colleague Christina Ruiz, she tried to go to all of those spot painting shows. She must have been so bored. I mean, to go around the world looking at David Hurst spot paintings. Yeah. Anyway.
Somebody told me that there's a bit of a queue at the auction houses to resell your spot paintings. Now, I can't confirm it, but yes, because an auction house in a sale can really only have one spot painting, and there are over 1,400 of them out there. So one can assume that some people want to resell for one reason or another. You know, death, divorce, and debt are the famous 3Ds that trigger sales. So is there, what do you think, Annie? Do you think that this is debasing his brand a little bit so much?
Well,
much material?
You can't, supply is the perennial problem in the market, and you certainly can't say that about Hearst, can you? And he still seems to be making, dare I say, churning out more paintings. I mean, there are Instagram stories of him or one of his studio assistants sort of studiously making these paintings smaller, to be sold, very commercial, small, sellable. You just have to wonder whether his art is verging more on luxury brand now. It's almost as if, there's no value in the art, but yeah, he's certainly everywhere at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting that you might have a Hearst in the same way as you might have a certain kind of, Hermes bag or something like that.
Well, certainly hotels use it. They brand themselves, don't they? W Hotel may well have a Hearst, or indeed Las Vegas, the Fertitta brothers. There was that whole suite that was decorated, wasn't there? And there was a bar. And that he certainly has really found his market. But is that a market for art, or is it a market for luxury goods?
Yeah, and it's a lifestyle you're buying into. This whole empathy suite, it's sort of in Hearst's mind almost. I can't really think of anything worse.
Yeah, what's a lucrative line of work?
It is, yeah.
But anyway, just recently, literally last night, Hearst posted on his Instagram that he was going to be doing interesting. He used the word drop, a kind of, I don't know whether like artists are now trying to be like streetwear labels and doing kind of drops of print collections. So his latest print collection of Blossom paintings, he's going to be accepting cryptocurrency for them, which obviously is Hearst again sort of seeing one of the latest trends in the market and kind of jumping on it as well. And interestingly, he says that this is a sort of limited edition of prints which will run out when demand runs out for the prints. So not quite sure when that ends. But anyway, this leads us quite nicely into this crazy trend at the moment that is kind of taking over every art world discussion, it feels, about NFTs, and it's obviously linked to the kind of cryptocurrency bull run that we're experiencing as well at the moment. So Georgina, can you try to quickly explain to us what the hell an NFT is?
So what is an NFT? Very, very briefly, you have to get your mind around the notion of assets which are tangible or intangible, and fungible or not fungible. I think we have a slide. If we could have the slide
we can look at slide
11. It should be, I think, slide number 6. Here we go. Now, this is actually a really nice, clear slide. On the right, you have tangible, i.e. things you can pick up, like Mona Lisa, or you wouldn't want to pick up a car, but you could try, or a bar of gold, or $1. Those are tangible. And on the left, you have intangible. And within each of those, you've got fungible and not fungible. Fungible basically means that something that's exactly like something else. And non-fungible is something where they're different. You've got a little kitty, you can see that. It's a crypto kitty. So it's an intangible asset, but each one is different. And so one of the problems that with intangible things, it's something that lives on the internet. This is really difficult to get one's head around, really, but it's basically, you've got a sort of code. It's like a long series of letters and numbers. And in the case of non-fungible tokens, NFT, which is what we're talking about, this token, which is a code, actually represents an artwork that is a digital artwork. So it's on the internet, it lives on the internet. And each one is different. So even if you make a series of, like as Kenny Schachter did, you make a series of 6 digital artworks. Each of those six ones has got its own token, which is different. And what is the advantage of non-fungible tokens? The advantage is that it is a way of stamping the creator, the ownership, the creation of an artist onto something that's then recorded on the blockchain. And the blockchain, I'll remind you, is a technology that is distributed. It's like a database, if you like. It's a distributed ledger, and it's not, doesn't depend on one person. It's distributed between a number of different computers. So your NFTs, non-fungible tokens, represent art that has been made for the internet. Now you could print out a picture of it and hang it up if you wanted, but you don't have to because it lives on your screen. You could also print out a picture of Mona Lisa. You couldn't sell it because you don't own Mona Lisa and nobody else is going to buy a picture of your Mona Lisa. Whereas with a non-fungible token, you can actually trade in those digital artworks because the non-fungible token represents the ownership, who owns it. And there is, even for artists, a great advantage is that if it's traded again, not the first sale, but on resale, the artist gets a small cut. So that's a good side of it. Does that sound clear to you?
I think so. I think I'm constantly trying to catch up with this, and I'm also aware that I don't speak crypto as well. So I feel like an 85-year-old whenever I try and discuss this. Annie, you've also kind of gone quite deep into this world just recently. What is the latest news with NFTs? And I feel like we're probably going to have to start with Christie's.
Yes, I'm afraid we are. And it's a rabbit hole that if you're up for coming with me, let's go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's beyond a bubble. The Beeple sale at Christie's. So this opened,
I think we've got a picture of Beeple as well. Yeah, here we go.
Beeple every day here. So Christie's is billing this as the first standalone NFT work of art being sold by a major auction house. And as you mentioned at the top, Anna, it started with an unknown estimate. I think bidding started at $100, and within an hour it was at something like 1 million within an hour, and it currently stands at 2.4 million with 14 days to go, 121 bids. It's quite an incredible situation. I don't know if you need a short explanation of Beeple for anyone who's been living on the moon. He's a digital artist who got into NFTs last October, largely because the concerts that he was doing visuals for people like Justin Bieber, Nicki Minaj, they've obviously been put on pause. I think we should probably mention that Christie's has decided to accept Ethereum for the sale, but buyer's premium will be paid in dollars. So the auction house itself is being paid in hard cash rather than crypto. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the artist, the Beeple is willing, basically he's willing to accept crypto.
Yes.
But Christie's is like
not yet
with the cold hard fiat. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Haven't quite gone as far as Damien Hirst yet, but we'll see. Okay. I mean, it was interesting because apparently Christie's pivoted on this issue of whether they were going to take crypto on the platform that we all know and love, hate, Clubhouse. Noah Davis was asked in a Clubhouse chat whether Christie's was going to take crypto, and at the time I think he was saying, "Oh, I don't know, I don't think so." But they pivoted quite soon after. I mean, it makes sense. There are thousands of young people, under 30s who've made millions in crypto, who are new to the art world, and these are the kind of people that Christie's is no doubt wanting to attract. But I think the Christie's sale aside, what's really interesting with NFTs and what we're seeing is that there's this whole market, both primary and secondary, now opening up, ostensibly without the traditional gatekeepers of the auction houses and dealers. So, artists can go to these marketplaces. We've got Nifty Gateway, Rarible, OpenSea. There's a number of them with varying degrees of accessibility. but essentially artists own the means of production, so they can go straight to these marketplaces and mint an NFT without having a gallery, which would usually take a 50% cut on sales. So I think that's quite revolutionary, quite frankly. It's also, sensibly more accessible for collectors too. You don't have to be a member of some kind of in-group to purchase the art. You don't have to walk into these quite intimidating white cube spaces. And on the whole, I mean, prices are transparent in the sense that they don't change depending on, what level of collector you are or what you look like when you come into the gallery. So there's a level of transparency there, which is kind of quite new to the art market.
Interesting as well, like the idea, it seems from my point of view as well, that the kind of lack of the analog events that normally drive the market, the fact that we don't have live fairs and we don't have very many exhibitions or even sort of in-person auctions anymore, is kind of hastening the ascent of these digital markets as well. And I feel it's sort of pushing more focus upon them, because obviously they're digitally native works, and some of the people as well are the kind of these tech crowds that is sort of almost fetishized by the art market in terms of being the next big collectors. Seems to be much more their sort of native environment as well, buying here. Do you think that sort of all of that is kind of having an impact in terms of the rapid growth of this area?
Yes, I think, sorry, Annie.
No,
I think all of the above. I mean, what I think is terribly interesting, and this is in a broader thing, is that we've got the passage of generations at the moment as well. We've got the boomers dying out. I think you saw Mrs. Marion, who was the widow of Walter,
yes.
What was he called?
The amazing Texan
John Tarrion, yes. And
four times married.
4 times married, yes. Yeah. There's another swathe of these traditional artworks coming on the market. And at the same time, we've got this new young generation coming up that they want, look at the market for cores and cores toys. So we've got two. Now, the question is, will they ultimately, sort of somehow find a way of living together? Is it a threat, or is it, in the case of Christie's, they've absorbed, for a start, they're selling their first NFT. So I think this is really interesting. It's a sort of clash of generations. We've got a whole generation of digital natives, as you say, Anna, who've got a lot of money.
How long is it going to be before the traditional artists how long is it going to be before Jeff Koons jumps on the NFT bandwagon? That's what I want to know.
A nanosecond, I would have thought.
I think he'll be moving in fairly fast.
So I think there are so many applications for NFTs. I mean, one thing people are saying is that, they could be used as sort of, because all transactions are stamped on the blockchain, they could exist simply as sort of traces or online versions of real life physical works of art. So there are so many applications here. I mean, that could potentially be quite huge for the issue of fakes and forgeries in the traditional art market. If every new work that's created is also then has an NFT sort of avatar, so to speak, which means that there is a permanent, immutable record of that work of art and all transactions.
I mean, this is all the discussions that we had in 2017 over blockchain. And I mean, it is valid. The only problem is that who are going to be, I mean, you mentioned gatekeepers earlier. Who's going to be the gatekeeper? Who's the person that's going to put them onto the blockchain? Now, it's easy if it's the artist themselves. So for a living artist, you can really see and they're going to get a commission if it's resold and so on, and you've got an ownership trace. It's slightly more complicated if you have a Rembrandt and then somebody puts it onto the blockchain as being genuine and it's not. So I think that's interesting, but I think that ultimately, yes, this technology is going to be quite transformational in the art world.
Can we just speak about 2018, Georgina, because you were on a panel. There was that art and tech panel, wasn't there, at Christie's?
Whole day.
And it was very new to the art world then. I remember thinking back then, what's this? But it turns out, and I had a conversation with Jason Bailey of Art Gnome yesterday, and they were giving away goodie bags, totes at that summit, in which were Robbie Barrett NFTs. They were just these cards. I mean, I didn't get one. I don't know if you got one.
I didn't, no.
So apparently they're now today worth between $70,000 and $75,000, I think, dollars. But they're considered the lost Robbies, because there are millions of pounds or millions of dollars worth of these NFTs, which people just we frankly didn't know what they were in 2018, and have gone on to be worth quite a bit. So I'm sorry to break that to you. I think we both lost
You've
out.
Devastated me.
Sorry.
But you didn't get one either. So
I didn't,
that's right.
no,
We're all
I didn't.
square.
We're
all
exactly.
square.
I didn't bother to go. I remember thinking that there were other things I'd rather do with a day in July than sit in an art and tech conference. But
It was interesting because it was a moment when every other email I was getting as a journalist was about blockchain. And then the whole thing sort of died because, of course, it's not the solution to everything in the world, from cancer to cotton wool balls. And in the same way, I think that NFTs, certainly have their place, but seems to me there's a speculative bubble at the moment.
Yeah, well, that's actually what I was going to ask you as well, is kind of, in your opinion, is this a huge speculative bubble, this NFT thing, which has really kind of exploded on the kind of, I'd say, come into the mainstream of the art market in the past, probably just 2 or 3 weeks, really. Is it a bubble, or is it something that we can't afford to ignore because we'll be like the internet naysayers? What do you reckon, Annie and Georgina? What would you put your money on?
Well, I think, it is undoubtedly a bubble at the moment. I think there's a lot of tech money, there's a lot of investment, there's a lot of speculative investment, and we are beginning to see works traded awfully quickly. The one benefit of flipping in the NFT world is that these works have smart contracts built into them. So artists are paid a percentage of all resales automatically. So 10%, for instance, is the usual sort of amount. So artists aren't losing out as they might be in the traditional market from flipping, but there is certainly an accelerated trading happening akin to the gaming scenario. But on the whole, I think they're here to stay. I think that the traditional art world sort of needs to take notice and is taking notice. I think, if we can combine some of the best aspects of both the smart contracts from the NFT world with some of the more sort of maybe discerning eye of the traditional art world, Bitcoin, that market has been prone to volatility, but the general trajectory has been upwards. And I think the NFT market will go the same way.
Yeah, I totally agree with Annie. I think everything you say is absolutely true. Our problem at the moment for us who come from a more traditional art world is that most of the art is pretty, shall we say, but I think that there will be sort of a convergence, and I think that traditional art will try to take, it's a platform as well. It's a technology, and I think they will adopt it, and I think they are here to stay. And I agree with Annie. I think it is a bubble at the moment, but it will settle down.
Yeah, I hope it'll settle. And as you say, there are certain things, maybe the smart contracts, and the fact that if you can trace an NFT on the blockchain and you can just see its transaction history as well, you can see sort of how many times it's sold, when it's sold, and how much it's sold for. It kind of, it really sort of shows up the fact that you can't do that in the normal art world. And why can't you? I feel like the sort of traditional art world sort of have to maybe kind of justify why you can't do that. So I wonder whether it will maybe sort of apply more pressure in that respect. And I know that there are lots of arguments against that kind of transparency, and we've been over this argument so many times before, so I won't get into it, but it really sort of does seem to throw it into sort of sharp relief.
So I would mention that while transactions are recorded on the blockchain, you can still buy and bid under pseudonyms and usernames. So anonymity is still protected in the NFT world, which is one of the key things.
Which is the main thing.
Right. And so, you can still hide your identity. And the other thing is that there are gatekeepers emerging in the NFT marketplace. So Nifty Gateway, I understand, is very much about who you know. There's a 3-month waiting list to get a work minted there. So it's quite a restricted list, whereas OpenSea is seemingly more open. Similar hierarchies are emerging, which is quite interesting. Maybe it's just human nature.
I think it is, isn't it? Sort of these things always kind of end up being a little kind of cliquey, and where, I don't know, I suppose it's where sort of cliquiness ends and quality control begins as well. Is always a sort of interesting question in the art market.
And like the traditional art market, you'll actually end up with a few who will do terribly well and an awful lot who won't do anything at all. In a way, it will evolve in a way like the art market.
Shall I take us back to 2019 and talk about fairs? Do you remember?
Fairs, what are they?
It's really weird to talk about them. Those places that we used to go to and get to drink free champagne every now and again. But yes, so so we haven't had an art fair, well, certainly in the UK, really. I mean, apart from 154 last year in October, which was a bit of a treat. We haven't really had them for quite a long time, almost a year now, really, in most of Europe. So they're having to kind of think about different ways to earn money. And Frieze has recently just announced that it's going to be opening its own gallery space on Cork Street, that it's going to be renting out to galleries for sort of pop-up exhibitions. And it's also launching a membership scheme. And of course, these are all things sort of helping a company that can't do its bread and butter business of producing events get some revenue and also remain relevant as well. So, Georgina, what do you think 2021 is going to kind of hold for fairs in terms of revenue streams, and what do you think might happen? What do you think won't?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no doubt it's been disastrous for art fairs. Indeed, anybody who organises any sort of events that bring people together, you know, not just art fairs, anyone who's a conference organiser. And of course, Frieze belongs to Endeavour, which is a big entertainment. I mean, they do an enormous thing in Hyde Park in London at Christmas. I can't remember what it's called, Christmas something or other.
Oh, what that awful,
yes,
awful, lovely event.
Yeah.
Whatever
Yes.
it's called, the Winter Wonderland.
Winter Wonderland,
Yes.
exactly. You know, so anybody whose business model is based on that, it's a complete disaster. And they're obviously hunting desperately for alternative sources of revenue. And one of them, Frieze as a magazine, has got, you know, sort of got this model, hasn't it? A subscription model. So they've got this idea that you can have, and it will bring some revenue in. But I think that it's going to be, I mean, for a start, there are quite a few fairs that are programmed for later on in the year, from the summer, from May on. Some have already been put off until 2021. But I think it's going to be very tough, because even when they come back in real life, the people are going to be traveling less. There's no doubt about that. But the other thing is that art dealers, when I speak to them, they all say they're going to do fewer fairs. They're not going to want to travel so much. There are also ecological considerations, climate change. Do we really want to be flying all over the world and shipping art all over the world? So I think fairs, as they come back, they will be they'll be much smaller iterations. They'll probably be hybrid, in the sense that there will be a part of them which is online and a part that's in the real world, and they'll be more local. And a lot of people say, you know, that's not such a bad thing. You remember that word fatigue that we all used 2 or 3 years ago?
I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
What do you think, Annie?
Well, I mean, I certainly felt fatigue. I mean,
Yes.
yeah, although it's a sort of distant memory. I mean, I think the issue, one of the things we were to discuss was ghost booths, wasn't it? I think that's quite an interesting possible new thing opening up, or new way of doing art fairs, certainly for the near future.
Which is basically, to explain that idea, is something I think it was originally Art Basel in Hong Kong, which at the moment is still planning on going ahead in May, as I understand it, unless I've missed a press release. In the past hour, it's quite likely. So it's still planning on going ahead in May. And what they're saying for the galleries that can sort of get their art to Hong Kong, but they can't get themselves or their staff to Hong Kong due to travel restrictions, they will provide a local person basically to man their booth at the fair, so they can still have a presence. That's basically the concept, isn't it?
Yes, but I mean, yes, I mean, I do think that it's very difficult to substitute people when they go to, you know, to Deus Ropac or any booth. They really want to see the person, and that person is the best place to explain the works. Now, they have extremely competent people who work for them, but these ghost booths is another matter, isn't it? Because it's going to be a local employee who is probably not even an employee of the gallery, but has been brought in. And I think they'll just be less persuasive. I mean, selling contemporary art, a lot is the story that you tell about the artwork, that the buyer then goes home, and when they got it, they explain that story. So I think, you know, they really need to get in real life fairs back.
I mean, the first time I witnessed that was at 154 in October in London, and there were a couple of New York galleries. I think they'd flown the works over, and they had people they'd employed in London on the ground to man the booths. But I mean, it's a very small fair, and the people I spoke to knew the owners of the galleries, and they knew these stories and knew how to, you know, tell the stories of the work on show. And so there was that sort of connection, that face-to-face connection, which ultimately, you know, the art market is, the art world is,
and I think
built on.
I think there's also that thing that there's a certain amount, particularly the more sort of, say, charismatic art galleries and dealers too. And I think you see it in some ways in like the antiques world and things as well. People buy into that person, they buy into their eye, they want to be made to feel special. And you see it at the kind of VIP previews as well, where they're stuck in that situation where you've got a dealer and everybody wants to speak to, you know, the head person. And they've got 5 of their best clients on the stand at the same time, and that's a nightmare for them because they want to make each one of them feel like they're the only person in the world. And and I kind of feel like you don't. It's a good halfway step at a time when you know, sometimes it's the only option. I should mention that Art Dubai next month are also going to be doing this ghost booths idea. And interestingly, they're charging all of their galleries nothing up front to take part in that fair. But what they're going to do is they're going to take 50% of all sales up until the cost of the booth, which I think is an interesting idea.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. To get
a lot of galleries have pushed for that. Yes.
Oh, yeah. I wonder whether we'll see that sort of. It's a brave model, but I wonder whether we'll see it again. But that's an aside. But I just wonder, it'd be interesting to see how those sort of ghost booths play out. I can't see them. I think they're a useful kind of short-term solution, but I can't see them becoming kind of long-term thing. Anyway, we should move on to questions because we've had so many in. We're going to try and get through some of the 60 odd questions that we.
Oh my gosh, 60 questions! Wow.
Yes, I know. But anyway, we've picked out a few. We've had one in from the artist Michelle Pred, who's said that I'm not hearing much about women artists making NFT art. So what are your thoughts about that?
Such a good question.
It is. Yes. Diversity in the NFT world has been a bit of a buzz topic, actually. I mean, I've heard both. I've heard people complain on Clubhouse that the space is very white, male dominated, and I don't just mean the artists, the gatekeepers, the collectors. I mean, there is a crypto bro element to this. Let's be straight. But I've also heard Black artists saying that it's a game changer for them as they can bypass the traditional gatekeepers. I have been alerted to one Instagram account, Hello Waka, Women of Crypto Art, and they have more than 350 crypto artists identifying as she, her from all over the world. So I would urge you to check them out. So it's an interesting one. I mean, I would say that the discussions on Clubhouse have certainly been very inclusive. There seems to be a sort of a real sharing of information and educational aspects of the conversations, which is really kind of the antithesis of the art market as we know it, which is largely secretive and exclusive. And I think
it's come out. I mean, basically, this has all come out of the gaming industry, hasn't it? So, and that is a very white male thing, isn't it? I guess that'll take a while.
I think, I don't know whether it's a matter of optics. I'm not really sort of deep into the world and into the NFT world, and whether we're just seeing the headlines, and they are white male artists and the Mark Cubans and the Elon Musks of this world, the big names who are beginning to invest in NFT art. And I think there's a trickle down with, the crypto bros of varying degrees. I don't know if you call Elon Musk a crypto bro. I did. So it wouldn't be surprising if that was the demographic, but it seems underneath that there is a real urge, certainly by the artists, to build a more diverse and inclusive marketplace. So
right, it does take a little bit of time. In the case of those communities kind of finding each other as well, like you just pointed out somewhere as well. I mean, sometimes it's difficult to navigate these places and find people of a similar minded as well at first. Got another question, quite different here. It's just in what ways do museums wittingly or unwittingly play a role in collectors managing art markets? So I suppose in what way do the museums unwittingly
well, I mean, where there is a potential problem is when you have trustees or donors who can influence museum policy. In the sense that first of all, influence museums, they push certain artists who they themselves have got, or they can lend works of art. And I think that really does happen. And of course, they have advanced knowledge of shows. So that's more than other industries would even be called insider trading. That there's going to be a Richter show coming up in 3 years' time, and because you're on a board, that ahead of everyone else. I mean, Richter obviously isn't a very good example, but a younger artist where you can sort of then, buy into that artist. So I think that there is a potential problem there, and I think that it's up to museum boards to be very careful.
Yeah, no, there's increasing scrutiny as well of museums from a number of different fronts. I feel like the commercial influence on museums does become increasingly recognised. I'd say it's increasingly recognised.
That is another problem.
Show you go to, I mean, there's a list of sponsors, and it's sort of dealer, isn't it? You know, the dealer sponsoring,
dealer collector,
exactly.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. I think that's only going to increase as well, really, in the given sort of funding issues that I mean, increased scrutiny of funding from all quarters at the moment, and the lack of sort of state funding in most places. That, you know, they've got to get some money from somewhere. I would say, to play devil's advocate, so you can sort of see that there's probably going to be increasing support from commercial galleries for shows that obviously showcase their own artists as well.
Yes, yeah.
It's just going to happen. They're going to be more and more so. We've got another question here, back to NFTs. Do you think one effect of this, the NFT smart contracts, might be that contractual resale royalties become more prevalent and accepted in markets for physical artworks?
Well, I hope so, quite frankly. I mean, I think that's one of the, you know, we have another question maybe coming about building that better. And I think, you know, as far as supporting artists goes, I think, you know, I'd hope that the traditional art market adopted the smart contract route. I mean, with these contracts, there is even the distinct possibility that lesser known and, you know, less expensive artists can actually earn a living off these resales, which has been a huge problem for artists. You know, the majority of artists working don't make a living; they have to have secondary jobs. So I would hope so. I don't know how.
Well, we already have artists' resale rights, so it's a question. So that, you know, the mechanism exists in Europe and in America, but it's only in California and it's not applied. I think it's so. And in fact, there's one artist in America who's been pushing very hard to try to get that.
I think
you need a blanket system across the board. That's the problem with artist resale rights and all the way, and also with some of the collecting agencies and things as well. There's like a kind of there's a problem with kind of the middleman and the fact that it's not applied uniformly.
Yes.
The extra paperwork involved, and the fact that it's sort of, you know, somebody who sells something has to kind of complete the paperwork.
Yes.
And the beauty of the smart contract is that it automatically goes to the artist.
It automatically happens.
Exactly. Yes. But I'm afraid that I'm not possibly quite as optimistic as you are, Annie. You know, I think it'll. I mean, when you think there was a lot of opposition to artists' resale rights, for example, in this country, when it's extended to recently dead artists. So I don't think that I don't think the art world is that engaged,
or that generous,
the tradition, or indeed that generous.
I mean, you know, how would you not want to support the very sort of the foundation of our world,
of our whole world? But no,
doesn't always happen. We've got a question here about fairs from Ed Winkleman. Actually, he said all the fair.
Hello, Ed.
Yes, hi Ed. Said all the fair directors we talk with agree that the future of their events are hybrid, in real life and online. But I'm wondering about the disadvantage of online collectors, visitors will experience when people in the booth can consume their attention, and how that will slowly kill off the enthusiasm for the online aspect eventually as we regain the ability to travel freely again. So sort of, you know, will people's appetite to view things online really continue?
Well, I think in a way, Ed, you've answered your own question, haven't you, Ed? Yes, I think that people that they don't. I mean, we're all absolutely fed up of doing things online. I think that when people can, if possible, I mean, fairs will go towards hybrid while people can't travel, but I think gradually we will go back to a situation where we meet in person. No,
I don't know. I think personally that, I mean, as I was going to say OVR's website, let's call it what it is. Websites become more sophisticated, or as these viewing experiences, as AR, VR becomes more sort of par for the course. I think as technology develops, we will see, you know, this more hybrid approach. And I think as people choose to travel less, perhaps for the environmental reasons, I don't know if it's going to be diminished. I actually only see the digital sphere as growing, and I think what we've been witnessing is the beta stages of this, and it has been a bit what, wearisome. And I think, there will be a balance, but I certainly don't think that people will be put off from the online experience. I think they'll go to that as well.
Yes, but perhaps that some things that can be done online will be done online, like sort of showing something that can't be shown physically, but people will need to meet each other all the same. Perhaps there'll be a way of explaining about an artist's work or something that could be done online, but then you actually physically see the artwork, that you actually physically go.
I think there has been some good content, but I do think that you need to be, and we were talking about this in relation to like online dating as well. Like it's really hard to fall sort of head over heels in love with a JPEG. And I can't, like, it's interesting. I might occasionally kind of discover some things online, and you'll watch some interesting kind of content, interesting videos, and there's been some interesting talks and things that have come out of this, but I don't like, just to get that kind of visceral feeling of seeing something in the flesh. I think we still need to kind of see them in person, and just to get that kind of, you feed off the energy of other people at things like art fairs and things as well. I mean, they can be insufferable after a while, and we've all maybe had existential crises in the middle of the aisle from art fairs, but I think they're kind of we do sort of need to have some return to them. But as you said, a sort of hybrid will definitely be here to stay. We have got a lot of questions coming in about NFTs, so I'm going to try and ask you a few more about that. With Hearst and Christos both trying it, do you expect the acceptance of cryptos as a method of payment to become more commonplace in the art market as adoption increases in other sectors? So how mainstream do you think this is going to become?
I mean, I think so, absolutely. I think it's only a matter of time. I mean, I haven't invested in crypto yet, but I'm late to the party and I'm going to get on it. It's just a matter of time, I think. I wonder when the other auction houses will follow suit. One thing I do wonder is whether Christie's or one of the auction houses are going to acquire one of these NFT marketplaces, because that would be quite a smart move, I think.
That would be, yes. That would be interesting.
Remember when Sotheby's went on that run of acquiring all sorts of different companies, or admittedly pretty dacky, but when they bought Orion Analytical, the scientific analysis thing, and then they bought RTC Partners, it would be interesting. I don't know, it's a very different Sotheby's now, but it would sort of, in Sotheby's role, it might seem like a kind of Sotheby's move to buy one of these trading platforms. So anyway, that's an interesting thought. Maybe watch that space. Annie, we've had quite a lot of questions coming in asking you to repeat the name of the female NFTs Instagram account that you mentioned. Right,
so it's Women of Crypto Art, and it is Hello Walker at HELLOWOCA, Women of Crypto Art. Hello Walker.
So if you just searched on Instagram Women of Crypto Art, you probably get to that.
Exactly.
Okay, good. We've also had a question here, which is quite a big question, saying, does the commodification of art reduce its value?
First, define your terms. Commodification in the sense of it being turned into a financial product.
Or do you, and value versus price? I mean, we're talking about commodification would suggest the possible, increase in price or tradability.
It's tradability, yes. Value, it's art as an asset. It's art as an asset class, isn't it? Really, basically. And this has been very much, I mean, there are probably 25 artists in the world who you could consider an asset class, like Bacon and Freud and so on, Richter probably as well. When there's on top of that, when there's quite a large volume of works available, this is somewhere where you can stash your cash and is an alternative place. I mean, people who have a lot of money, they will spread their money between different investments. So they will have some real estate, and they will have some art. It'll be, a percentage of their fortune will be put into that. And that will be art really as considered as an asset class and probably stuffed into a free port somewhere. It would be visible.
In the north of England.
So does it, I was going to say Geneva or, Luxembourg or somewhere like that.
Tyneside.
Yeah, well, good luck with that one. I don't know that. I mean, you've still got to ship it somewhere else, haven't you? I think Geneva is more central, or Luxembourg.
So I suppose, yeah.
Does it demean, it's, as you say, it's also define your terms of what value. Are you talking about historical value? Are you talking about aesthetic, symbolic value? So
I think there's some
It's a
people
tricky one.
maybe who would, if an artist becomes hugely, and maybe we see it with some of the young artists as well, whose careers have not become particularly established, but who suddenly become highly valued by the market as well. And we've obviously seen Scott Rayburn wrote a piece referring to them as red chip artists as well, taking over from blue chip artists recently.
yes.
Whether maybe you could see that the kind of fast market ascent of those artists before they've had much of a grounding in terms of sort of a museum, history of museum exhibitions, might diminish their value in the eyes of curators who might sort of be turned off by the fact they've become market darlings. Maybe, I think sometimes there is a certain element of that, do you think? Or do you not think
it's a sort of snobbery almost.
I think sometimes it's a bit of a snobbery. I think that's the case with, so with Damien Hirst. Some people I think would definitely, you know, hit that 2008 sale and things, and some of the kind of market success of his art meant that a lot of people stopped viewing it as art.
But I mean, it was very, very glitzy, that 2008 sale. I mean, everything was encased in gold and sort of had artificial diamonds in you know, those display cases.
Actually, linked to what I kind of just mentioned is somebody's asked if they could hear our views on the recent sensational prices for emerging artists like Amoako Boafo. So have you got some views on what's happened with those artists? I mean,
well, that was a sad tale, wasn't it? I mean, Nate Freeman did a great article in ArtNet where he really dug into the background on that fateful Phillips sale. I think it was February 2019 when his work went for, I think, around 600, I don't have the figures in front of me, about £600,000 for that lemon bathing suit woman on the painting. But I think with that instance, he'd actually, he heard Stefan Simchowitz was flipping the work. And so he got a couple of investors to basically buy the work. And he then agreed to, I think, give back about £500,000 or dollars worth of art in return. But I think that kind of, it fell through for him in that I think that he gave the works over to these two investors, but I'm not sure that he ever saw any return. So I think it was a pretty sad tale for him. I think it really ended up biting him.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no doubt that there is money at the moment. For a start, money is unbelievably cheap, and there's an enormous amount of money around, and there is this search for assets to put money into that could go up. And there is definitely an interest at the moment in women artists and artists of color in particular. And I think, unfortunately, the rising tide is rising all the boats, and it's, you know, we need a little bit of time to look back, and some of these artists I think are not worth the valuation that is being put on at the moment. There's a frenzy. Matthew Wong is the case, and personally I think that some of these artists, those price levels will not be maintained. I find that quite bubbly at the moment. It's
a bit worrying if we look back. It's interesting because it's art. I'd say that a lot of the art at the moment is maybe these sort of red chip artists, very much figurative. As well, in a way that it's so different to the zombie formalists they were producing. But maybe you sort of look back to what happened there, and you do sort of slightly fear for some of these artists. Hopefully the bottom won't fall out of this market in the same way, that it won't be so sort of speculative, and people will be taking more of a sort of long-term view on it. And
yes, but I do fear that some of these markets are quite speculative. They call it now zombie figuration instead of zombie formalism.
I think that's a bit unfair, really. I think it is. Work is far better than those far extreme paintings like chewing gum or bird shit. You know, I think these figurative paintings are actually quite something.
I love a lot of the artists actually who do incredibly well at the moment. I agree with you. It's not quite as cynical as it was.
No, but they are still quite, I think some of the values are still there. I think it is bubbly, that market.
And there's quite a lot of virtue signalling, I think, from collectors who are buying, you know, women and artists of colour. So there's that element which is very
signaling as a whole another topic. I'm going to have to wind up here because I'm afraid we haven't been able to get through most of these questions, but we've done quite a few. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to us, and for sending in, for being such an engaged audience as well. And thank you to Ger Johns for supporting our talk. A recording of the whole talk will be available on our YouTube channel from tomorrow. And if you want to get more of this sort of chat, you can sign up for our monthly Art Market Eye email newsletter via the Art Newspaper's website. Our March edition is actually going to be out next week. It will come out on Thursday morning. So if you sign up before Wednesday, then you will get that. And all of us will be writing on that. For now, thank you so much again. Have a lovely weekend. And I'm off to get a drink, and my puppy has just started whining at me. So goodbye.